The vengeful soul of the slaughterhouse. The story begins here. The suburban outskirts of the city in the early 2000s still retained much of their wild, desolate nature. Far from the dazzling neon lights and noisy traffic of the bustling metropolis, this area was mostly empty lots, spontaneously built industrial zones, and poor workers' huts cowering next to black, stagnant canals. Tucked away in a hidden corner of a muddy red dirt road, completely isolated from the residential areas, was the largest pig slaughterhouse in the region, owned by Bao the Big. As night fell and shrouded everything, when ordinary families sank into deep sleep after a tiring day, that was when Baolan's slaughterhouse awakened, entering its most terrifying and noisy phase. At 2 a.m., the air in the slaughterhouse was thick, suffocating, and carried a distinct, unmistakable characteristic. It was a sickeningly heavy composite stench. The pungent smell of fresh pig blood spilling across the concrete floor. The sour, festering stink of pig manure stagnating in the drains. The acrid odor of bristles scalded off by boiling water, and the cloying smell of raw fat vaporizing under the pale, cold glare of the floodlights. Heavy trucks loaded with live pigs from the western provinces rumbled in. Car horns tore through the night. Headlights swept blinding beams back and forth across the muddy, slippery yard. Then came a cacophony of jarring noises assaulting the eardrums. The heavy, shuffling footsteps of butchers wearing rubber aprons and knee-high plastic boots. The agonizing squeals of pigs being herded off the trucks, driven by a survival instinct as they caught the scent of their dead kin. The heavy thud of cleavers hacking relentlessly into massive butcher blocks. The bubbling of boiling water in large vats billowing steam. All of it blended together to create a symphony of slaughter, a cold-blooded termination to serve human appetite. Standing imposingly in the middle of the 100-square-meter slaughterhouse, commanding his troops like a general on a battlefield, was Bao, the true master of this bloody empire. Bao had just turned 45. He had a massive, burly physique like a bear. The nickname Bao wasn't because he was weak, but because of his round, bulging beer belly that hung over his belt. Beneath his dark, sweaty skin were bulging muscles forged over decades of wrestling with the butcher's trade. His face was broad, covered in a scruffy beard, and his large, fierce eyes were always bloodshot from lack of sleep. Unlike bosses who only pointed fingers, Bao started from scratch, working as a hired hand scraping bristles, so he never looked down on the labor. Every night when a large batch of pigs was brought in, Bao would personally grab a razor-sharp butcher's knife and head to the bleeding area. He worked with extraordinary strength and ruthless precision. With one hand, he pinned a pig weighing over 100 kilos to the floor, his knee forcefully driving into the animal's belly, while his other hand swung the knife down. The sharp blade plunged straight into the anus, pulled out decisively, and fresh red blood sprayed out like a stream, gushing into large aluminum basins already set in place. The pig only managed to jerk a few times, letting out choked gurgles before lying completely still. The workers looked at Bao with eyes filled with both respect and fear. They feared his gruff, rough temper. Bao managed his men with vulgar curses and a ruthless, straightforward fairness regarding money. Do a good job, and the reward was handsome. Make a mistake or ruin the meat, and he would curse you out so fast you wouldn't know what hit you, sometimes even beating you right on the spot. In the eyes of the local toughs and workers, Bao was a literal money-printing machine, a fearless man who used animal blood to build a multi-billion dong empire. But heaven is fair, it gives no one everything. Bao had health, wealth, and the authority of a commander, but he lacked tact, diplomatic cunning, and especially emotional sensitivity. Relying on the fact that he made the money and was the pillar of the family, he lived a crude life, disregarding spiritual values. Rolling around the slaughterhouse all day, his body always reeked of a distinct smell that no expensive soap or perfume could wash away. The smell of pig fat, of tangy blood, and of stale sweat. This rustic, spiritually empty brutishness of Bao Lan stood in stark contrast to Kan Nan. The sworn brother and soul partner who co-founded the Slaughterhouse. Kan was 5 years younger than Bao. They had known each other since their destitute days when both were wet behind the ears country boys coming to the city to make a living. Back then, Bao was a butcher, while Kan carried loads and kept records at the bus station. Seeing that Kan, though skinny and frail, had a sharp mind, calculated numbers at lightning speed, and knew how to speak diplomatically, Bao invited him to join the business. When Bao decided to split off and open his own slaughterhouse, Kan scraped together all his meager savings and borrowed from relatives to chip in a small capital, about 10%, into Bao's empire. The nickname Kan Nan, Kan the Wise, was given by Bao, praising the man's cunning mind, a complete opposite to Bao's rough exterior. Kan had a scholarly face, pale skin, wore gold-rimmed glasses, and was always neatly dressed in pressed shirts and trousers, looking entirely out of place in a slaughterhouse. The division of labor was very clear. Bao handled the front line, managing the workers and pushing production in the bloody, muddy area, while Kan sat in the air-conditioned glass room on the mezzanine, specializing in negotiating contracts, bookkeeping, dealing with supermarket clients and restaurants, and bribing health inspectors. On the surface, they were a perfect match, one martial, one civil, complementing each other's flaws to make the slaughterhouse thrive. Bao always proudly thumped his chest, telling everyone he had no blood brothers, and treated Kan as one. If I have a bowl of rice, I eat half, he eats half. But with his simple, straightforward butcher's mind, Bao could never see into the darkest corners of the human soul. He didn't know that behind the intellectual glasses and gentle smile of Kan Nan lurked a malicious heart, a simmering jealousy, and a bottomless greed that grew daily, directly proportional to the slaughterhouse's massive wealth. Kan despised having to bow his head and play second fiddle to Bao. He considered his 10% share an insult. He thought that without his clever calculating and diplomatic mind, an uneducated butcher like Bao could never have turned this slaughterhouse into a large enterprise, nor could he have signed those lucrative meat supply contracts with major supermarkets. Yet, the most money and power flowed into Bao's pockets. Bao lived in a villa, drove luxury cars, and spent money like water, while Kan still lived in a slightly above-average townhouse and rode a scooter. He realized a bitter truth: despite being a shareholder, in the eyes of the workers and partners, he would forever be just a high-class hired hand, a secretary clinging to boss Bao Lan's apron strings. This resentment and envy smoldered in Kan's heart like a pile of hidden embers, and the drop of water that made the cup overflow, the catalyst that ignited this sinful fire, was the appearance of Hung, Bao's young, beautiful wife. Hung had just turned 30, 15 years younger than Bao. Originally a poor country girl from the Mekong Delta, she came to the city to work in a garment factory. Hung possessed a sultry, voluptuous beauty with pale skin, a flirtatious smile, and watery eyes that always seemed to ripple with amorous waves. The day Bao met Hung at a roadside eatery, the butcher was instantly captivated by her beauty. With money and the generosity of a nouveau riche, Bao easily pulled Hung away from the cramped garment factory, bringing her to his magnificent villa, turning her into the powerful lady of the slaughterhouse, elevating her from a poor wretch to a life of luxury. At first, Hung was quite satisfied. She didn't have to work, just stay home eating well, dressing nicely, going to the spa, and buying designer bags. Every month, Bao threw her thick stacks of cash to spend as she pleased, including sending money to her parents in the countryside. But when physical needs are overly satisfied, spiritual and carnal desires arise with fierce intensity. Hung began to feel disgusted, even nauseated by her older husband. Bao was rough and gruff, uncouth in speech. He didn't know how to give flowers or speak romantically, he only knew how to toil for money. Coming home, he'd just flop down and snore loudly. The most terrifying thing was his body odor. No matter how much imported soap Bao used, Hung could still smell the cloying scent of pig fat and the tangy stench of fresh blood seeping from his every pore. Nights in bed with Bao were a perfunctory duty for Hung, rough, boring, and possessive, devoid of any romantic ecstasy. It was during those dreary, empty months that Hung fell into Con Nan's arms. It all started on nights when Hung cooked late-night meals, bringing them from the villa to the slaughterhouse to nourish her husband and the workers. While Bao was shirtless, dripping with sweat, yelling and wielding his knife and chopping board downstairs in the bloody slaughterhouse, Hung would often retreat to the air-conditioned glass room upstairs to avoid the stench. That was where Con was. Con always knew how to please a woman. He didn't pounce clumsily like Bao. He poured her a cool drink, pulled out a chair, affectionately asked about her health, complimented her new dress, and praised her perfume. He sensitively noticed the sorrow in the beautiful woman's eyes. With sweet words, feigned empathy, and the fake sensitivity of a half-baked intellectual, Con skillfully peeled away Hung's defensive layers. One drizzly night in July, the slaughterhouse was quieter than usual. Bao had drunk a few shots of cheap rice wine with the workers and fell fast asleep on a folding cot in a corner of the slaughterhouse. Up in the glass room, only Hung and Con remained. Hung sat on a cushioned chair, looking through the clear glass down at the bloody slaughterhouse below, then turned to look at Con sitting elegantly typing on his computer. Suddenly, she burst into tears. The bitter tears of a woman living in luxury but starved of affection spilled forth. "Brother Con, I'm so miserable," Hung sobbed, bringing a tissue to wipe her tears. "People call me the boss's wife, a rich man's wife, but I live no differently from a doll in a glass cabinet. That old man Bao treats me like an ornament, like a breeding machine. All day he only cares about pigs and money. Being in bed with him feels like hugging a stinking slab of fat. I can't take it anymore, brother." Con stopped typing. He slowly stood up and walked closer to Hung. His dark heart pounded with excitement. This was the moment he had been waiting for. Crossing the line of morality to steal his best friend's woman, dealing a fatal blow to the ego of the man he had always envied. Con raised a soft, pale hand, gently stroking the messy hair on Hung's forehead, wiping away the tears rolling down her flushed cheeks. I understand your pain," Con's deep, gentle voice whispered into Hung's ear like a mesmerizing charm. "A beautiful, fragile flower like you deserves to be cherished in the most romantic ways. Brother Bao is a good man, but he's too boorish, unworthy of your love. If it were me, I would never let you shed a single tear." Hearing these sweet words poured into her ear, the repression Hung had held back for so long exploded. She looked up with her watery, lust-filled eyes at Con. No one said another word. Loneliness and primal cravings pulled them together. Right there on the sofa in the glass room, right above the head of the husband sleeping soundly in the bloody slaughterhouse below, an illicit, despicable affair officially began. From that night on, Con and Hung threw themselves at each other like two moths craving fire. They secretly met at luxurious hotels in the city center on afternoons when Bao was busy visiting pig farms in the provinces. In those private rooms, heavy with the scent of perfume and wine, Con freely fondled and pampered Hung, giving her carnal pleasures that Bao Lan had never provided. But Con didn't stop at satisfying the flesh. He was an utterly opportunistic and greedy man. Every time he held Hung in bed, he skillfully planted sinister calculations in her head. "Hung, do you plan to live in secret like this forever?" Con took a drag of his cigarette, blowing out illusory smoke, caressing Hung's bare shoulder. "What if old Bao finds out? With his hot temper like Zhang Fei, he'll kill both of us." Hung nestled herself against Con's chest, her voice trembling. "I'm scared too," But what can I do? I can't divorce him. He makes the money, the land deeds, the savings, they're all in his name. If he finds out I'm cheating, he'll kick me out onto the streets with nothing, and I'll starve to death, brother. Khan sneered, his eyes flashing a cold, sinister look behind his nearsighted lenses. You're so stupid, why would you leave with nothing? That estate, that wealth, has a part of your effort and mine too. I've suffered like a horse and an ox for him for over 10 years. He gets to eat the meat while I only gnaw on the bones. It's time we took back what rightfully belongs to us. How do we get it back? Hung asked, bewildered. Slowly, I will figure it out. You just need to do as I say. Keep track of his every move. You must know the safe's password and the bank records for me. We will have a legitimate future together, living in his villa, spending his money, and no one will dare to judge us. Listening to Khan paint this tempting future, her greed and lust completely clouded her reason. She nodded repeatedly, obedient as a lamb lying snugly in the jaws of a cunning wolf. The two sinners had no idea that their despicable schemes and plots to usurp wealth and murder were gradually opening the gates of hell. That bloody slaughterhouse was not just a place to end the lives of poor animals, soon, it would witness a heinous crime, a place where brotherhood and marital vows would be chopped into pieces, pulverized under the sharp blade of bottomless greed. In the final months of the year, the weather in the outskirts began to shift with cold northern winds blowing from the river. Yet, in stark contrast to the freezing weather, business at Bao Lan's slaughterhouse was hotter than ever. That year was a massive triumph for the meat supply industry. Thanks to stable supply, reasonable prices, and Bao's reputation for straightforward, honest dealing among traders, the place struck gold. Large refrigerated trucks bustled in and out. The muddy yard was bustling day and night. The squealing of pigs, the hacking of cleavers, the roaring of water pumps washing the pens echoed continuously like a triumphant anthem of money flowing into the safe. The peak of this success was when Bao Lan received a lucrative proposal, signing an exclusive contract to supply fresh meat to a chain of the 30 largest supermarkets across the city and neighboring provinces. This was no longer small-time black market trading. It was a giant leap to elevate this ramshackle suburban slaughterhouse to a massive corporate scale. Bao was overjoyed. The crude, boorish butcher of the past was now intoxicated by the wine of victory. To prepare for this historic signing, Bao decided to do something he rarely did, personally audit the entire revenue and expenditure books, debts, and worker payroll over the past 3 years to report his financial capacity to the partners. Previously, claiming to be uneducated and absolutely trusting his life and death sworn brother, Bao had handed full control of accounting and treasury to Khan Nan. Bao's only job at the end of the month was to look at the final sum Khan presented. If the profit was steadily increasing, Bao would nod, withdraw the cash, put it in the safe, and split the percentage fairly with his friend. But who can learn the word regret before it happens? Blind trust placed in the wrong spot is a knife you stab into your own back. That night, it was raining heavily. The slaughterhouse below was still noisy with pig squeals. Bao Lan brewed a pot of strong Thai tea, sitting alone in the glass room on the mezzanine, meticulously flipping through the general ledger Khan had just closed on the desk. Under the bright fluorescent lights, Bao's large, fierce, bloodshot eyes squinted, scanning every number, every invoice for feed, veterinary medicine, and transport, balancing the independent costs. But with over 10 years of rolling in the profession, knowing market prices by heart, his intuition told him something was wrong. Bao stopped at the transport costs and the weight loss of live pigs on the road. Strange, Bao muttered, scratching his bald head and scruffy beard. I know the route from the west here like the back of my hand. The rates for refrigerated trucks are clearly fixed, so why does Khan inflate them by up to 15% every month? And then there's the loss from pigs dying of suffocation or losing weight. We buy select pigs, our drivers are all close relatives who drive carefully. How could dozens of pigs die in a month without a single word of report? Hot blood rushed to Bao's face. He pulled out his calculator. His thick, calloused fingers pressed the buttons rapidly. He dragged out dusty red invoice folders from the corner cabinet to cross-reference. The more he investigated, the more the hidden loopholes appeared. The phantom numbers, cleverly manipulated by the educated accountant's hands, became glaringly obvious. It wasn't just transport fees and weight loss, equipment purchases and health inspector bribes were all inflated by Con Nan to siphon money from the company. The amount of money siphoned into Con's private pockets over the past 3 years was not small, it amounted to billions of dong. Bao Lan sat paralyzed in the armchair, the pot of Thai tea had gone cold at some point. The room was terrifyingly silent, with only the heavy breathing of the butcher. Bao's heart felt like it was being suffocated. The betrayal of money is sometimes less painful than the betrayal of the heart. He had always treated Con like a blood brother, ready to share his empire and wealth. Yet, this white-glasses intellectual brother saw him as a fat cow to be milked, embezzling the sweat and blood money stained with gore that he had to stay up all night to earn. The next morning, when Con Nan walked into the office with his usual polite smile, he saw Bao Lan sitting there like a stone statue, his face hard, bloodshot eyes staring unblinkingly at him. On the glass desk, the books and invoices were chaotically strewn about, marked heavily in red. "Brother Bao, you're up early? Was the slaughterhouse busy last night?" Con was startled, his smile becoming stiff, but his cunning nature helped him quickly regain composure. Bao didn't answer immediately. He took a deep drag of his cigarette, blew thick smoke toward the ceiling, then slowly picked up the general ledger and threw it down in front of him. "Con, sit down here. We brothers need to talk this out." Bao's voice was hoarse, suppressing a rage ready to explode. Con swallowed hard, his instinct warning him of trouble. He slowly pulled up a chair, his eyes avoiding the books. Bao tapped his thick fingers against the red-line text. "Explain this to me. For 3 years, inflated transport costs, non-existent pig weight loss, buying supplies for 10 but billing for 100. Am I mathematically wrong? The missing money flowing into your pocket could buy 2 storefront houses by now. Do you take me for a fool?" Con's face drained of blood. He never expected a rough butcher who only knew how to stab pigs like Bao to one day personally dig into the matrix of books he had created. The exposure was too sudden, but with the nature of a petty villain, Con didn't confess immediately, he played the victim. Brother Bao, you misunderstand," Con hastily defended, his voice beginning to tremble. "Those expenses are unnamed diplomatic costs, grease money for big bosses, money to smooth over health inspection papers. How can those be clearly recorded in the books? I did it all just to keep our slaughterhouse running smoothly." Bang! Bao slammed his fist like a sledgehammer onto the glass desk, cracking it deeply. "Shut your mouth!" Bao roared, the veins on his neck bulging. "I've been roaming the underworld since you were still carrying loads. Which boss, which gate don't I know the price of? You tricked me to line your own pockets. You keep mistresses, buy land, I don't care. But you steal my sweat and blood, you're utterly despicable, Con. I treated you like a blood brother. I gave you 10% shares without you putting up capital. Yet you still despise it? Do you want to swallow my entire empire?" Stripped of his disguise, Con was tongue-tied. He knew he couldn't worm his way out. His pride and long-held jealousy suddenly surged, overwhelming his fear. "Yes." Con lifted his face, his cold eyes staring straight at Bao. So what if I took it? Do you think your 10% is big? Without my calculating mind, without the relationships I worked hard to build, could your shabby slaughterhouse have risen to what it is today? You're just an uneducated butcher whose sweat always reeks of pig shit. You have money, a villa, a beautiful wife, what do I get? This petty cash is just the rightful wage I'm taking back. Hearing these ungrateful words from the mouth of his closest brother, Bao froze. His huge hands, like those of a guardian deity, clenched tightly, his knuckles cracking. If he swung his hand, that 1,000-pound slap could shatter Khan's jaw right there. But Bao didn't hit him. Extreme anger was held back by the brotherhood forged in their destitute youth. He let out a long, heavy breath, his eyes filled with ultimate disappointment, looking at Khan as if looking at a stranger. If that's how you feel, I have nothing left to say, Bao said, his voice freezing cold and final. I should take this ledger to the police. Throw you in jail to rot for embezzlement. But out of respect for the days we shared a bowl of cold rice, I will spare you. The money you stole, consider it alms to a beggar. Khan had just let out a sigh of relief, thinking he had escaped, when Bao's next sentence fell like a death sentence upon his head. Starting tomorrow, I will take back your entire 10% share in this slaughterhouse. The new meat supply contract with the supermarkets will be in my name alone. You will no longer be a shareholder or have any say in the books. You will just be a wage-earning employee. I'll pay you $15 million a month to be a grunt handling health papers. If you don't like it, get out. Finished speaking, Bao gathered all the books and walked out of the room, leaving Khan sitting paralyzed in his chair. For a deeply ambitious and arrogant man like Khan Nan, Bao's decision was no different from stabbing a knife into his heart. He lost everything, his shares, his status, his massive income. From a small boss who could bark orders at the slaughterhouse, he was now demoted to a mere wage slave, to be mocked by the workers he used to despise. The resentment and jealousy turned into a pitch-black poison boiling in his veins. He swore in his heart, Bao Lan, you dare drive me into a corner, I will show you what it means to lose everything. But Khan's crisis didn't stop there. Trouble never comes from just one side. While Khan was frantically plotting his revenge, another spark ignited from Hung, Bao's loose-moraled wife. That day, Bao Lan came home after a night shift at the slaughterhouse. Tired, he threw his jacket, reeking of pig blood, onto the sofa. Hung was sitting doing her nails, wrinkling her nose and covering it. Ugh, go take a shower right now. You smell like a vulture, it makes me nauseous. Normally, Bao would just laugh and go shower to please his wife. But today, he was already seething over the situation with Khan. Hung's words were like oil on a fire. He stepped close, staring intently at his young, vibrant wife, who smelled of expensive perfume. Bao's sharp, butcher-like eyes suddenly stopped at a faint red bite mark on the white nape of her neck, a spot her shirt collar hadn't fully covered. Bao frowned slightly. He was a street-smart man, more than capable of knowing where that mark came from. Lately, he had been so busy at the slaughterhouse that he let Hung freely go to spas and shopping. He vaguely noticed his wife acting differently. She dressed up more, often secretly clutched her phone to text, and especially made excuses to avoid him when he demanded marital intimacy. Where have you been going lately? What are you doing that you're never home? Bao asked, his voice probing. I went to get my nails done, get a hair wash with some friends, that's all. Hung flinched, quickly pulling her collar up, clicking her tongue to cover up. Bao sneered, a cold smile that gave Hung goosebumps. He leaned his face close to her ear and whispered in a deep, murderous tone. Hung, I'm a guy who slaughters animals, my eyes are used to seeing blood, so they're very sharp. Don't think that just because I bury my head in pig shit all day, I don't know when flies are buzzing around behind my back. Let me tell you, if I catch the bastard who dares to put horns on my head, I'll chop him into 100 pieces and throw him in the river for the fish to eat, soul included. Finished, Bao stormed into the bathroom, slamming the door. Outside, Hung slumped on the chair, her face drained of blood. Her heart pounded as if it would burst from her chest. Bao's threat wasn't empty. She knew her husband's brutal, cold-blooded nature too well. If Bao discovered the incestuous affair between her and his sworn brother, surely neither she nor Khan would meet a good end. Furthermore, if Bao divorced her, with his ruthlessly fair nature, Hung would be kicked out with nothing, no house, no money, returning to the life of a poor laborer. That prospect, for a woman accustomed to luxury and spending money like water, was truly more terrifying than death. In extreme panic, Hung called Khan. The adulterous pair met at a cheap, run-down motel on the outskirts of the city. A pathetic downgrade from the five-star hotels they usually frequented, reflecting their sheer desperation and fear of being followed. Inside the musty motel room, Khan paced around like a caged beast. Hung sat on the bed crying pitifully, recounting Bao's threat. "Brother Khan, we're dead. He suspects something. If he finds out, he'll kill us both. Or we should run away," Hung begged, hugging Khan's trembling arm. Khan shook Hung off, snapping angrily. "Run? Run where? The money and shares, he's cut them all off. He stripped me of everything. Run away empty-handed to eat dirt? I won't accept it. I gave 10 years of my youth to build that slaughterhouse. I can't let him just knock me down so easily." Khan paused, grabbing his head, messing up his usually slicked back hair. He took off his glasses, his eyes suddenly flashed a sinister, cold look, exactly like the eyes of a hyena stalking wounded prey. He sat next to Hung, grabbing her trembling shoulders tightly, whispering devilish words into her ears. "Hung, listen to me. Divorce or running away are both last resorts. We'll leave empty-handed, hiding like rats for the rest of our lives. The only way to solve everything, so you can legitimately inherit that massive wealth and I can get back what's mine, is for old Bao to disappear. Permanently." Hung's eyes widened in horror, her breath catching in her throat. She recoiled slightly, stuttering, "Why you mean kill him?" No, we can't. He's as strong as an elephant, and he has underworld connections. How could we possibly kill him? If the police investigate, we're all dead. Don't be afraid, as long as the plan is perfect, no one will know. Khan curled his lips into a faint smile, the smile of a demon in human skin, and began to drip poison into Hung's mind. Think about it, Bao has no close relatives. If he suddenly disappears for a legitimate reason, you, as his legal wife, will own everything, the villa, the cars, the savings. I will take his place running the slaughterhouse and continue signing the big contracts. We will have tens of billions in our hands, living together like king and queen. Or would you rather live in poverty, forever dreading his wrath? The sweet words and the vision of immense wealth and freedom struck right at the bullseye of Hung's greed. Her initial fear was gradually overwhelmed by bottomless avarice. She bit her lip until it bled, her watery eyes turning soulless, then slowly growing sharp. How are you going to do it?" Seeing the prey take the bait, Khan pulled Hung into his arms and whispered a horrifyingly cruel plan. "Old Bao is big but very trusting, especially of me. At the end of this month is the 30th night of Tet, Lunar New Year's Eve. The slaughterhouse will let all the workers and drivers take leave to go back to their hometowns for the long holiday. The slaughterhouse is hidden in the middle of the fields, on the 30th night, with firecrackers shaking the sky, no one will come near. I'll make an excuse about wanting to drink and reconcile, to bid farewell to the old year, so I'll stay behind with him at the slaughterhouse. Khan paused for a moment, picking up a Zippo lighter on the table, flicking it with a clack. The yellow flame illuminated his demonic face. All you need to do is go play cards all night at Mrs. Hang's house in District 1 to create an alibi. When he's drunk, I'll make my move. I'll kill a butcher using his own tools, then dispose of the body in the river with the swift current behind the slaughterhouse. On the morning of the first day of Tet, we'll spread the news that he lost tens of billions gambling on football and ran away with the money in the safe, fleeing from gangsters. No body, no murder case, everything will be smooth sailing. The plan was laid out in meticulous, chilling detail, like a contract with the Grim Reaper. In that rundown motel room, two people in human form but with the hearts of vicious demons finalized their plot to murder the very husband and brother who had nurtured them. They had no idea that the bloody slaughterhouse, already saturated with the energy of slaughtered animals, would use their heinous crime as the final drop of blood to awaken vengeful spirits. The upcoming New Year's Eve would become a bloody feast where they would pay the ultimate price for their betrayal. Time passed coldly and relentlessly, like the black water in the canal behind the slaughterhouse. Soon, the last pages of the 12th lunar month were torn away, making way for the busiest and most sacred day of the year, the 30th of Tet. Usually, on the days leading up to Tet, suburban slaughterhouses had to operate at full capacity, workers toiling day and night without sleep to supply the massive amount of pork to the city market. But by the afternoon of the 30th, when the final shipments had been loaded onto refrigerated trucks heading out in all directions, the entire 100-square-meter slaughterhouse of Bao Lan suddenly fell into an oppressive silence. The machinery stopped, the water ceased flowing. All 30-something workers, from bleeders to hair scrapers to drivers and loaders, had received fat bonus envelopes from the beaming boss and happily slung their backpacks over their shoulders to head to the bus station to return home for Tet. There were only a few hours left until the midnight hour. The weather that year turned bizarrely unseasonable. On the afternoon of the 30th, the sky wasn't clear and bright for people to welcome the spring. Instead, an off-season thunderstorm rolled in, thick and murky. The suburban sky darkened as early as 4 p.m. Black clouds swirled and churned like giant dark waves, swallowing the last glimmers of the old year. Wind battered relentlessly, bringing heavy rain that lashed against the tin roofs of the slaughterhouse, creating a chaotic, jarring noise that drowned out all sounds of mortal life. Heaven and earth seemed to be howling, or perhaps deliberately letting down a white curtain of water to conceal a heaven-shaking crime about to descend. Exactly as planned in the rundown motel room, Hung called Bao to say she was going to her close friend Mrs. Hang's house in District 1 to play cards and kill time until midnight, and probably wouldn't be back until the morning of the first day of Tet. Bao, who was simple-minded and busy at the slaughterhouse, just nodded in agreement, only telling her to be careful on the road. He had no idea that his loose-moraled wife's trip was to create a perfect alibi with witnesses, paving the way for the scythe of death pressed against his neck. At this moment, in the glass room on the mezzanine of the slaughterhouse, only two men remained, Bao Lan and Kan Nan. Outside, the rain continued to pour. Inside, the air conditioner hummed softly. On the glass table where they usually drank water, Khan had thoughtfully prepared a lavish feast, a golden boiled chicken, a plate of thinly sliced pork roll, a bowl of bamboo shoot and pig's trotter soup steaming away, and especially 2 bottles of expensive Chivas 18 whiskey, Bao Lan's absolute favorite. Bao walked into the room, tearing off the rubber apron stained with dried pig blood and throwing it over the back of a chair. He walked barefoot, using a cotton towel to wipe the sweat and rainwater from his bald, scruffy head. So meticulous, no wonder I'm pleased, Bao chuckled, slapping his massive belly and plopping down on the sofa. About the books from the other day, I've said my piece. You learn from it, and tonight we brothers drink a final year-end toast to wipe away all grudges. In the new year, you just keep being a manager on a regular salary. I won't let you suffer. Khan pushed up his glasses, the corners of his lips curling into his usual gentle, polite smile. He personally poured the amber liquid into 2 large crystal glasses and pushed one toward Bao. Yes, I know I was wrong, Brother Bao. I've thought a lot about it these past few days. I regret betraying your trust. You saved me from our destitute days, sharing half a bowl of rice with me. Yet I was foolish and greedy. Today I set up this feast, first to offer to the New Year's Eve, and second as a glass of wine to apologize to you. Let me drink this one first. With that, Khan tilted his head back and drained the glass of strong liquor in one gulp. Seeing his sworn brother act so sincerely, Bao Lan's straightforward, brotherly nature immediately surged. The butcher was rough but quick to anger and quick to cool down. He grabbed his glass and laughed loudly. Good. A man who dares to act and admits his mistakes is a good man. I have a hot temper and curse a lot, but my heart loves you the most. You know that, right, Khan? Come on, bottoms up. From tomorrow, we'll stand side by side again. I'll handle production, you handle the paperwork, and we'll give our all for the upcoming supermarket contract. The crystal glasses clinked with a clear ring, and the foreign liquor slowly flowed down their burning throats. Outside, lightning slashed across the sky, flashing fleeting lights through the glass wall, illuminating the 2 facing faces. One face was candidly drunk in brotherhood, the other scholarly but hiding eyes as cold and sharp as a wolf's fang, silently counting down the seconds of a life. With the alcohol flowing, the burden in his heart lifted, Bao drank aggressively. One glass after another, he talked loudly, recounting memories of the old days when they stowed away on red buses, sharing a stolen steamed bun at the bus station. Then the early days of sweating to scrape pig hair by hand until they were splattered with blood. The more Bao spoke, the more emotional he became, tears welling in his bloodshot eyes. Khan, meanwhile, only drank moderately, mostly just refilling Bao's glass. He sat listening to Bao's old stories with a terrifyingly indifferent attitude. In his head at that moment, there wasn't a single ounce of emotion or pity. He only felt jealousy. He hated the way Bao patted his chest acting like a benefactor, hated the condescending tone of a superior. He thought to himself, you say you love me, but you demoted me to a wage slave. You get to keep the 10 billion dong slaughterhouse, you get to take the beautiful wife to bed every night. Today, I will take it all back, I will take your life too, you fool. The clock struck 11:30 p.m., only half an hour left until the new year. Bao Lan was visibly tipsy. Though his alcohol tolerance was high, nearly 2 bottles of strong liquor on top of a month of sleepless nights during the 12th lunar month had defeated his massive muscular frame. Bao began to slur his words, his eyes drooping, nodding off. I'm too drunk, Khan, Bao mumbled, waving his hand. I'll go down to the slaughterhouse floor and wash my face to wake up. We'll offer the New Year's Eve prayers in a bit. Bao propped himself up on his knees, swaying as he stood. His near 100-kilo frame stumbled out of the glass room, dragging unsteady feet down the iron stairs leading to the slaughterhouse floor below. Khan sat still on the sofa. He took off his myopic glasses, pulled a handkerchief from his pocket, and wiped the cold sweat from his forehead. Without his glasses, his nearsighted eyes suddenly looked soulless, empty, and clouded with a murderous aura. He slowly stood up, walked to a corner of the room, and pulled out a pair of thick rubber gloves, the kind butchers use, slowly slipping them on. Down in the slaughterhouse, the vast space was dimly lit by a few remaining fluorescent tubes. The concrete floor was still slippery, slick with water and the reddish liquid left over from the afternoon slaughter shift. Bao Lan stumbled toward a large stainless steel water trough against the wall. He turned on the faucet. Freezing water gushed out. He bent over, scooping large handfuls of water to continuously splash his red, bearded face. The coldness made him slightly more alert. At this moment, Khan's footsteps came down the stairs, incredibly light and stealthy. Khan didn't walk straight toward Bao, he detoured toward the tool area. His heart was pounding, but his rubber-gloved hands were perfectly steady. He passed by the sharp butcher knives and the serrated bone saws. He chose a more sinister, effective weapon to finish off a massive bear of a man. It was a sledgehammer. The hammer had a nearly 1-meter-long ironwood handle, and its cast iron head weighed about 7 kilograms. This was a specialized tool used to deliver the critical blow to the heads of the most aggressive breeding boars, knocking them unconscious before the bleeders stepped in. The handle was slick with pig fat and rust, carrying the stench of thousands of souls that had perished under its weight. Khan lifted the sledgehammer. Its weight made his wrist dip slightly, but his hatred fueled the scholar's arms. He crept toward the water trough where Bao stood with his back turned. Outside, a sudden gust of wind slammed the tin roofs together with a loud clatter. Thunder rumbled continuously, like a war drum urging the gates of the underworld to open. Bao Lan wiped the water from his face, taking a deep breath. He vaguely heard footsteps behind him. The instinct of a street tough made him wary. "Khan, bring me a towel," Bao said in a slurred voice, slowly turning his head. But his sentence was never completed. The moment Bao turned half his face, under the pale light of the fluorescent tube, a massive block of iron was hurtling down from the air. Khan had swung the sledgehammer above his head, channeling all his strength, his hatred, his jealousy, and his carnal greed into this decisive strike. He didn't aim for the face, but precisely at the fatal pressure point on the back of Bao's neck. A dull, heavy, dry sound rang out, buried under the rumble of thunder outside. The solid iron head struck straight into Bao Lan's cervical vertebrae with an impact equivalent to a head-on car collision. The sickening crack of breaking bones echoed horrifically. The extraordinary strength of the butcher was instantly neutralized. Bao's large, fierce eyes rolled back, the bloody veins in his pupils seemingly bursting. He didn't even have time to let out a single cry. His near 100-kilo body collapsed onto the concrete floor, slumping like a felled banana tree. Bao lay face down in a puddle of water mixed with pig blood. His body convulsed continuously, his limbs trembling violently, his thick fingers instinctively scratching the concrete floor. Fresh blood from his mouth, nose, and the shattered back of his neck gushed out, mingling with the carefully scraped pig blood, creating a bright red pool under the pale light. Even after taking a critical strike, the human survival instinct was incredibly fierce. Bao wasn't completely dead. Using the last dregs of his strength, he turned his bloody, mud-matted, bearded face to look up at his executioner. Bao's eyes at that moment were no longer the fierce eyes of the slaughterhouse boss, nor the simple eyes of the brother sharing drinks. They held an utter shock, extreme horror, and a sky-reaching resentment. He saw Khan, the blood brother he treated as his own flesh and blood, the man he had just shared a meal with, standing towering over him. Both hands still gripping the hammer. The gentle, scholarly face was now twisted into the hideousness of a hellish demon. Bao's mouth moved slightly, bloody foam trickled out with each weak breath, making choking sounds in his throat. It seemed he wanted to ask, "Why, Khan?" Khan stood panting. Looking into Bao's eyes, he felt no fear. He stepped forward, pressing his brand-name leather shoe into the convulsing face of his best friend, curling his lip in contempt. "Don't blame me, huh? Blame your own stupidity. You stole my livelihood, you treated me like a guard dog. Now this empire is mine, and so is your wife. Hung is lying in bed with her legs spread, waiting for me to come back. Rest easy and go to hell. Hearing about his wife, Bao's eyes bulged to their absolute limit. He understood everything. The betrayal wasn't just in the phantom invoices, it was the most filthy trampling of a man's honor. A surge of resentment blazed like fire, but his life force was exhausted. Bao let out a dry, rasping growl from his throat. His eyes gradually grew cloudy, losing focus. The hands that had been scratching the floor went limp. The once famous butcher exhaled his final breath, dying in utter agony by the very hands of his closest brother, right in the slaughterhouse he had sweated blood and tears to build. Khan threw the sledgehammer aside and pulled off his rubber gloves. He stared at the massive corpse lying motionless. However, killing the man was only half the plan. To usurp the wealth and legitimately live with Hung, Khan had to make Bao vanish from the face of the earth without leaving a single trace. No body meant the police couldn't file a murder case. Having anticipated this, Khan walked quickly to the corner of the slaughterhouse, where a giant, shining stainless steel machine sat. It was an industrial meat grinder, a super-sized model used to pulverize bones, meat, offal, and dead pigs to make animal feed or fertilizer. This machine was the perfect crime scene cleaner bestowed upon him by the devil. Khan flipped the power switch. The machine hummed once, and its 20-horsepower motor started to roar. The stainless steel augers inside the hopper spun rapidly, emitting a jarring noise capable of crushing gravel, let alone human bone and flesh. Khan returned to the corpse. A scholar's physique couldn't possibly lift Bao's 100-kilo frame. Coldly, he went to get a butcher knife, the very knife Bao used to bleed pigs, and a bone cleaver. On New Year's Eve, while citizens everywhere were gathering around ancestral altars, a brutally beastly scene was unfolding under the pale lights of the suburban slaughterhouse. Khan acted no differently from a man-eating monster. He rolled up his sleeves and began the gruesome work of dismemberment. He coldly severed joints and sliced off chunks of flesh from his best friend's body, exactly how butchers processed a wild boar. Fresh blood spattered onto his white shirt and his glasses-wearing face, but he felt no disgust. Greed had turned him into a demon. He carried the carved-up pieces of the corpse and threw them straight into the large hopper of the industrial grinder. The mindless machine couldn't distinguish between pig meat and human meat, it swallowed everything. The sound of steel shafts crushing bone echoed horrifically, blending with the thunderous explosions on the tin roof. From the discharge nozzle at the bottom of the grinder, a reddish, paste-like mixture of meat, blood, and bone fragments poured out in torrents, sliding down the open-air drainage pipe that led straight to the black, fast-flowing canal behind the slaughterhouse. Thus, Bao Lan's body slowly disappeared, pulverized by the machine into tens of thousands of tiny fragments, drifting down the dark, black floodwaters without leaving a single shape behind. The skull and the thick thigh bones, which were too hard for the grinder to completely pulverize, were carefully gathered by Khan into a thick black nylon bag. Carrying the bag on his shoulder, he braved the rain to the waste dump, an area smelling of rancid pig manure at the very back of the garden. Under a dense banana tree, he used a shovel to dig a deep hole, buried the bag containing Bao's bone fragments, tamped the earth down firmly, and covered it with pig manure to erase the smell and fool any eyes. Finishing everything, Khan returned to the slaughterhouse. By now, the clock read 2 a.m. on the first day of Tet. He dragged a high-pressure water hose, meticulously washing the entire concrete floor, blasting away every trace of blood and scrap of meat left on the grinder and the ground. Water and cleaning solvents washed away all evidence of the crime, returning the slaughterhouse to a cold, clean state, as if nothing had ever happened. Khan threw his blood-soaked clothes into the incinerator. He showered thoroughly with soap and cologne, then opened Bao's safe. He took out a few large stacks of cash, scattered a few forged football gambling debt notes he had painstakingly prepared across the desk to create the scene of a man who had broken the bank and run away. He picked up the phone and dialed Hung. On the other end, Hung's trembling voice came through the clatter of playing cards. "Hello? Is it done?" "It's done. Perfectly. Not a single trace left." Khan smirked, looking at his reflection in the window glass, his face now exuding the triumph and satisfaction of a man who had just pulled off the crime of the century. "Just keep playing cards peacefully. Tomorrow morning, you pretend to panic, come home, and report to the police that your husband gambled away billions and ran off with the safe. Leave the rest to me." Khan hung up. He lit a cigarette, took a long drag, savoring the extreme sense of relief. He had won. He had eliminated the thorn in his side, seized the tens of billions empire, and the beautiful woman. But the scheming villain had no idea that while the industrial meat grinder could pulverize bone and flesh, and wash away blood, it could never grind away a vengeful soul, nor could it erase the sky-reaching resentment of the wrongfully dead. And at the very back of the yard, beneath the pig manure-covered banana tree, Bao Lan's bone fragments were silently absorbing the rampanting energy of the ghost month. In the near future, from this very slaughterhouse drenched in animal blood, a horrifying, unprecedented retribution would slowly descend, forcing these beasts in human skin to pay a price millions of times over. 3 months passed since that murky, stormy New Year's Eve, and the play scripted by Khan Nan and Hung had succeeded beyond imagination. On the morning of the first day of Tet, Hung returned from her friend's house, wailing hysterically at the villa gates, reporting that the safe had been pried open, and all the cash, gold bars, and land deeds had vanished. On Bao Lan's desk lay scattered fake football gambling IOUs amounting to tens of billions. The authorities investigated, but with a crime scene showing no signs of a struggle, no blood, as Khan had used high-pressure water and chemicals to wash it spotless, and a motive of gambling debt and fleeing that perfectly fit the underworld business culture, the case gradually went cold. Rumors spread wildly that Bao Lan had fled across the Cambodian border to escape gangsters. Not a single person suspected the permanent disappearance of the famous butcher, except for heaven, earth, and the lingering spirits hidden beneath the black canal behind the slaughterhouse. Bao's death had paved the way for the adulterous pair to step into the light. As his legal wife, Hung naturally inherited all remaining assets and ownership of the slaughterhouse. She delegated full operational authority to Khan Nan. Khan, stripped of his shares but now smugly sitting in the director's chair, continued to sign the lucrative meat supply contracts with the supermarket chain. He moved his belongings into the luxurious villa to live with Hung. The two drowned in the intoxication of money, power, and carnal pleasures they had traded for a heaven-offending sin. However, the net of heaven is vast, though its mesh is wide, it lets nothing slip through. Humans can use despicable schemes to blind earthly laws, but they absolutely cannot hide the sky-reaching vengeful energy that was growing thicker and more oppressive by the day in that blood-soaked slaughterhouse. After the Tet holiday, the slaughterhouse resumed operations at double capacity to make up for the lost days. On the surface, everything seemed normal, the machinery clattered, the pigs squealed. But the veteran workers vaguely sensed an eerie, unusually cold aura enveloping the facility. The first to feel this strangeness was Old Six the Cripple, an old worker in his 60s who specialized in cleaning pig manure and guarding the place at night. His left leg was withered and dragged when he walked, but in return, he had an extremely sharp nose and a highly sensitive sixth sense. For about a month now, whenever night fell and he dragged his crippled leg around the cold storage area and the manure pits at the back, he would suddenly inhale a bizarre, foul stench. Having lived half his life with pig shit and blood, Old Six could clearly distinguish the smell of animal waste. But this smell was entirely different. It wasn't the sour smell of manure, nor the rancid smell of spoiling pig fat. It was a sickly sweet, tangy, utterly nauseating stench that shot straight into his brain. It was exactly the smell of rotting flesh, of a corpse in its most active stage of decomposition. The smell lurked behind the dense banana tree, crept through the cracks of the cold storage door, and clung to every nook and cranny, making Old Six break out in a cold sweat and his hair stand on end every time he inhaled it. And it wasn't just the smell. The pack of native guard dogs also started acting strangely. Previously, when Bao Lan was alive, the dogs were very bold. If you threw them a bone, they would scramble for it. But lately, as soon as dusk fell, the whole pack would tuck their tails between their legs and burrow under the stairs, whining. Especially on moonlit mid-month nights, the dogs would crawl out together and stand in a circle around the giant industrial meat grinder made of stainless steel. They wouldn't bark or bite, they would just point their muzzles at the empty hopper of the grinder, tilt their heads back, and let out long, mournful howls. The sorrowful, eerie howling of the dogs echoed in the dead of night, making even the working butchers feel chills run down their spines, their cleavers slipping from their hands. Old Six the cripple secretly lit a few incense sticks, placed them in a corner of the slaughterhouse, and mumbled prayers. Every wrong has its source, every debt has its debtor. If there is something hidden, please appear in a dream to your family, do not haunt the mortal realm. The terrifying omens at the slaughterhouse seemed to be just the prelude to a brutal spiritual sentence raining down upon the two sinners. As for Hung, after achieving her goal, she lived in luxury like a queen. But wealth bought with blood did not bring her peace. The ghosts of a guilty conscience and vengeful energy began to gnaw at the spirit of the loose-moraled woman. Hung developed severe insomnia. Lying on the soft mattress next to Khan at night, the moment she closed her eyes, her eardrums would ring with the roaring, grinding sound of the industrial meat grinder. The maddening sound seemed to grind away her very hearing. Accompanied by this was the hallucination of thick, dark red blood constantly gushing from the slaughterhouse drains, flowing across the ground, crawling toward the villa, creeping up the stairs, and seeping through the cracks of the bedroom door to surround her. Hung would often jolt awake in the middle of the night, her nightgown soaked in sweat, screaming hysterically. She had to rely on high doses of sedatives to maintain fleeting, nightmare-plagued sleep. The peak of her possession occurred on a quiet afternoon. The servants had gone out. Hung went down to the spacious kitchen of the villa alone to prepare roasted crispy skin pork, a dish Khan loved. She took a large piece of pork belly from the fridge, the best cut of meat that Khan had specifically ordered to be brought from the slaughterhouse. Hung placed the slab of meat on the wooden cutting board and picked up a sharp chef's knife to score the skin. But the moment her eyes touched the white, lifeless skin of the pork, the knife in Hung's hand suddenly froze in midair. Her eyebrows knitted tightly, her eyes widened to their limits. Her pupils dilated in sheer terror. On the surface of that mindless piece of pig skin, for some inexplicable reason, clear blue-black tattoo lines appeared. It wasn't the health inspection stamp. The intricate, curving lines formed the shape of a coiling dragon with extended claws. Hung held her breath, her entire body stiffening as if her pressure points had been struck. Her heart pounded so hard it hurt her chest. She recognized this tattoo. She could never forget it for the rest of her life. It was the exact image of the blue dragon tattooed on the right bicep of Bao Lan, the husband she had conspired with her lover to chop into pieces and throw into the river. The piece of pork on the cutting board suddenly jerked. From the unevenly cut edge, a stream of fresh, hot red blood unexpectedly oozed out, trickling continuously down the wooden board. At the same time, a deep, hoarse, liquid-filled voice echoed right next to Hung's ear. Hung, is my meat good? How could you grind me to pieces? Hung, mother, save me. Hung let out a terrifying scream, throwing the chef's knife onto the floor with a sharp clatter. She stumbled backward, tripped over a chair, and fell flat on the kitchen floor, clutching her head, screaming like a madwoman. The servants heard the noise and rushed down, only to find the lady of the house curled up in a corner of the kitchen, clothes soaked in sweat, eyes rolled back, pointing at the meat on the board, stuttering, blood, tattoo. Old Bao is back, he's lying on the board. But when the servants looked at the board, they only saw a normal piece of pork belly. There was no tattoo, no oozing blood. Hung had suffered a severe mental breakdown, resulting in hallucinations. From that day on, Hung never dared to set foot in the kitchen again. At the mere sight of pork, she would vomit violently. The once sultry, beautiful woman was now haggard and hollow, living like a soulless shadow in the very house she had schemed to steal. The punishment for Hung was a mental strike. But for Con Nan, the mastermind who directly swung the sledgehammer to take a life, the retribution struck directly at his physical body through a grotesque and utterly disgusting transformation. Con had always had the appearance of a scholar, tall, lean, and neatly dressed. Yet, within just a few months of taking over the slaughterhouse, his body began to undergo abnormal changes that no medical explanation could clarify. He developed a manic eating disorder. He never felt full, he always felt a burning hunger in his stomach. From a picky eater, he now devoured everything, but he craved pig offal and blood puddings in particular. The consequence of his gluttony was that Con's body ballooned rapidly, out of control. In just 3 months, he gained over 20 kilograms. This obesity didn't make him look muscular, it turned him into a grotesque figure. His belly swelled into a massive gut, his neck shrank, and his jowls sagged in thick layers of fat. The most terrifying part was his skin. From a tanned complexion, his skin suddenly turned sickly pale, always glistening with a sticky, cloying layer of sweat, exactly like the layer of fat under the skin of a dehaired pig. The hair on his head, eyebrows, arms, and legs also began to fall out in clumps, thinning rapidly, exposing a shiny, bald scalp. Every time Con stood before the bathroom mirror, looking at his reflection, he would break out in a cold sweat of horror. He could no longer recognize the intellectual director he once was. The figure reflected in the mirror looked no different from a fat, pale pig waiting for its day on the chopping block. But the most excruciating physical torture hadn't even stopped there. One night, as Con was sleeping, he suddenly felt a piercing pain at the back of his neck, as if someone were smashing his cervical vertebrae with a club. He jolted awake, reaching back to feel his neck. Beneath his pale skin, a strange lump had silently grown. At first, it was only the size of a marble, but it swelled as fast as a blowing balloon. Within a few days, it had inflamed to the size of a rice bowl. The area around the lump was bruised black and purple, taut and swollen, even a light touch caused agonizing pain. Con rushed to the hospital for a biopsy and scans, but the doctors just shook their heads, unable to find a cause. The lump wasn't cancer, nor was it a lipoma. It was just an accumulation of bruised blood, inexplicably inflamed, located in a highly dangerous position right against the spinal cord nerves. No doctor dared to operate. Every night, the lump at the back of his neck would throb and ache down to his very marrow. Con had to sleep on his stomach, gritting his teeth against the torture. He vaguely realized a horrifying truth. The position of the swollen, bruised lump was located exactly at the fatal pressure point where he had brought the sledgehammer down on Bao Lan's neck on New Year's Eve. The karmic debt of murder had not vanished into the meat grinder, it had taken root and parasitized his very body, forcing him to day and night taste the ultimate agony that his brother had endured before dying. Despite the crippling pain and confusion, greed still pushed him. Khan had to maintain the slaughterhouse's operations. One night in the 7th lunar month, the slaughterhouse was short-staffed. A main bleeder had broken his arm in a traffic accident and couldn't work. The influx of pigs was too high. The substitute workers were clumsy and didn't know what to do. In a desperate situation, fearing a delay in the supermarket delivery, Khan Nan, acting as the boss on site, had to roll up his sleeves and personally go down to the slaughterhouse floor to demonstrate. Khan hastily threw on a blood-stained rubber apron, slipped into plastic boots, and entered the bleeding area. He grabbed a sharp, wooden-handled butcher knife from an assistant. Despite spending years doing desk work, Khan had rolled around the slaughterhouse since his destitute youth. He still knew the butcher's trade by heart. A large, black boar was herded into the execution area by the workers. The animal had an iron wire looped around its snout and was pinned to the slippery, bloody concrete floor. Unlike normal pigs that would squeal and struggle frantically when dragged to the block, this pig was eerily docile. It lay perfectly still, its belly heaving, not making a single squeak. Khan approached, his steps clumsy due to his obese body and a throbbing lump on his neck. He dropped to one knee, driving his knee hard into the pig's side. His right hand gripped the butcher knife tightly, and his left hand clamped down on the animal's snout to expose the throat, holding its legs in place. Khan barked an order at the two assistants holding the pig's legs. He took a deep breath, flexed his pale, flabby arm, and prepared to swing the fatal strike. But the exact moment the sharp blade was about to plunge into the pig's throat, Khan instinctively glanced down at the pig's face. His motion abruptly froze in midair. Khan's heart seemed to skip a beat, and cold sweat broke out, soaking his back. The pig lying under his knee didn't close its eyes to wait for death. It raised its large head, and its eyes were staring straight into Khan's face. Those were not the cloudy, soulless eyes of a beast. Those eyes were large, fierce, the whites veined with red streaks. The dark pupils were deep, filled with a sky-reaching resentment and fury. They were the eyes of a human. More precisely, they were the eyes of Bao Lan in his final second before collapsing under the unjust blow of the sledgehammer. Khan's flesh crawled, his teeth chattered. He rubbed his eyes, thinking he was hallucinating from lack of sleep. He tried to calm down, telling himself it was just a pig. He gritted his teeth and raised the butcher knife high. But right at that moment, the pig's long snout suddenly parted. No pig sound came out. Instead, a blast of freezing air, carrying the stench of rotting flesh, blew straight into Khan's face. And from within the beast's snout, a deep, slurred voice, carrying the thick accent of Bao Lan's countryside, rang out clearly, drilling into the murderer's eardrums. "Khan, why did you chop me to pieces? It hurts so much, Khan." The voice was like an invisible blade piercing his eardrum, traveling down his nervous system. Insane hallucinations invaded his entire mind. In Khan's eyes at that moment, lying on the block was no longer a black pig, but the massive, bloody corpse of Bao Lan. The corpse was twisting, patched together from the meat fragments crushed by the grinder, looking up at him in accusation. "Ghost, it's already dead." Khan screamed horrifically, his glasses falling off and shattering on the floor. The extreme terror caused him to completely lose his bearings and reason. In his frantic, insane panic, Khan squeezed his eyes shut and swung the butcher knife down blindly, trying to dispel the ghost clinging to his mind. But the strike went astray, it didn't hit the pig's throat. The sharp blade, carrying the full force of his fear, chopped down with a sickening thud onto his own left hand, the hand holding the pig's snout. "God!" Khan let out a tearing, agonizing scream, both vicious and painful. The sharp blade cleanly severed two fingers, the index and middle fingers of his left hand. Blood spurted from the stumps in bright red arcs, splattering onto the pale, fat face of the murderer, mixing with his cold sweat. The 2 severed digits fell with a splat onto the slippery concrete, rolling into the pool of pig blood. Khan dropped the knife and fell backward, clutching his hand, which was drenched in blood, rolling on the slaughterhouse floor, screaming in pain. The 2 assistants standing nearby were terrified out of their wits and ran away in panic. The black boar, which had been lying still, suddenly surged. It tore its snout, covered in Khan's blood, let out a dry, rattling snort, and bolted out into the dark night, vanishing. Khan was rushed to the hospital in the night. The massive blood loss caused him to faint. The doctors could only stitch the wounds and shape the stumps. They couldn't reattach the 2 fingers because they had fallen into the bacteria-infested slaughterhouse floor. Lying on the stark white hospital bed, his left hand wrapped in blood-soaked bandages, the purple lump at the back of his neck throbbing with pain down to his bones, Khan opened his dull eyes to the ceiling. He realized that chopping off his own fingers was not an accident caused by carelessness. It was the first, most brutal and bloody warning from the netherworld. The vengeful soul of Baolan had returned. It didn't just haunt his dreams, it had possessed objects, borrowing the eyes of a beast, borrowing the very blood-stained hands of the sinner to begin reclaiming the debt, clear and plain. The suburban slaughterhouse, once Khan's money-printing machine, had now officially become a massive trap, a spiritual execution ground waiting to devour those who wore human skin but harbored the hearts of wolves who tore apart their own kind. The night of the full moon in the 7th lunar month was approaching. The gates of hell would truly open. The incident of Khan using a butcher knife to chop off his own 2 fingers in the middle of the slaughterhouse was like throwing a match into an ammo dump, igniting extreme panic among the workers. Rumors that the slaughterhouse was haunted, that the ghost of the old boss, Baolan, had returned to claim lives, began to spread at lightning speed. The workers, though accustomed to the aura of death, could no longer bear the heavy, colding energy that clung to every square inch of the slippery concrete floor. It started with a few workers calling in sick. Then the main bleeders quietly packed their bags and quit, not even bothering to claim their delayed monthly wages. They whispered to each other that while working the night shift, they often saw dark, bulky shadows standing in the corners of the slaughterhouse, or heard the heavy, shuffling footsteps of a large man coming from the cold storage. But when they shone their flashlights, there was absolutely no one there. The once bustling yard of refrigerated trucks was now empty. Customers at the major supermarkets, due to declining meat quality and disrupted supply chains, also began unilaterally terminating the contracts that Khan had shed blood to obtain. In less than half a year after Bao's death, the slaughterhouse went from a massive money-printing machine to a pathetic, desolate, and unsaleable ruin. The collapse of his business seemed still insufficient to pay for his heaven-offending crime. Karmic retribution began knocking on the door of the sinners, striking fatal blows to both mind and body. Hung, the loose-moraled woman, the callous accomplice, was completely defeated by hallucinations. High doses of sedatives no longer worked. She locked herself in the large villa, keeping the curtains drawn day and night, afraid of the light. In her severe nervous breakdown, Hung saw blood everywhere. When water flowed from the showerhead, she would scream, thinking it was pig blood. At the sight of anything red, she would tremble, curling up and hiding under the bed. The peak of her madness occurred on a sweltering evening. Hung, in a sleepwalking state, her eyes wide and soulless, drifted down from the upstairs to the luxurious kitchen. Under demonic influence, she craved a watermelon smoothie. Hung took half a red watermelon from the fridge and used a knife to cut it into small pieces. But in her insane delusion, the red pieces of watermelon suddenly morphed. They were no longer fruit. In Hung's eyes, they appeared as chunks of human flesh smeared with blood. And the blender on the kitchen counter expanded, transforming into the giant industrial meat grinder made of cold stainless steel down at the slaughterhouse. Hung heard Bao Lan's voice echoing in her ears, hoarse and raspy. Hung, grind the meat for me. Grind it to pieces. The beautiful woman's face became soulless, twisting into a horrifying smile. She plugged in the blender. Instead of putting the watermelon in, Hung slowly slid her right hand deep into the glass pitcher, right where the steel blades waited. With her left hand, she forcefully pressed the start button to the highest speed. Save me! Hung's blood-curdling scream tore through the silent night of the villa. The blender blade spun at thousands of revolutions per minute, shattering her fingers, dragging flesh and bone into a bloody vortex. Fresh blood splattered onto the kitchen cabinet doors, onto her pale face. The extreme pain snapped Hung out of her sleepwalking, but it was too late. Her right hand had been pulverized by the small machine, her fingers severed joint by joint, tendons and bones smashed, mixing with the watermelon to create a ghastly, bloody paste. Hung was rushed to the hospital. Her life was saved, but she lost her hand permanently, and her mind was completely gone. She was committed to a psychiatric hospital, where she sat in a corner all day, using her remaining hand to hold her bleeding stump, pretending to need meat, her lips muttering eerie folk songs to summon the dead. The price the loose woman paid was a fate worse than death, imprisoned in her own insanity and belated remorse. As for Con Nan, after the accident of chopping off his own fingers, he became increasingly irritable, paranoid, and brutal. The purple lump at the back of his neck grew larger and more swollen by the day, as big as an upside-down funnel. The agonizing pain that drilled into his brain tormented him day and night, forcing him to use morphine for relief. His body grew fatter and paler, waddling like a fattened pig about to be sent to the slaughterhouse. When all the workers had left, the slaughterhouse fell into ruin. Con couldn't accept watching his tens of billions empire slip away. The greed and stubbornness of a sinner drove him to cling on. He decided to stay and watch over the slaughterhouse at night himself, clutching a hunting rifle loaded with birdshot for self-defense, but in reality, just to vainly suppress the fear rising to his throat. And so, the fateful final night arrived. The 15th night of the 7th lunar month, the Ghost Festival, the day Yama opens the Ghost Gate, allowing 10,000 demons to freely return to the mortal realm to claim debts and injustices. That night, it wasn't a roaring thunderstorm like New Year's Eve, but a relentless, drizzling July rain, carrying the bone-chilling cold of the netherworld seeping into every crevice of the slaughterhouse. Con Nan sat in the glass room on the mezzanine, pouring a glass of strong liquor and downing it in one gulp. The lump at the back of his neck throbbed painfully, blurring his vision. He raised his bandaged, stub-fingered hand to massage his forehead, trying to drown out the sound of the drizzling rain outside. Exactly at midnight, the entire electrical system of the slaughterhouse suddenly shorted out. The backup generator remained dead. Pitch-black darkness, thick as tar, instantly collapsed, swallowing everything. At the same time, a series of noises came from below. It was the sound of heavy iron rolling doors at the entrances automatically slamming down. The safety locks clicking shut from the outside. Con jerked in terror, hastily grabbing a super bright flashlight and the hunting rifle from the desk. He stumbled to his feet, pushed open the glass door, and looked out into the hallway down below. The blinding white beam of the flashlight swept across the vast space of the slaughterhouse. The scene below made Con's breath catch in his throat, his teeth chattering. The slaughterhouse was empty of people, but it seemed to have come alive. From the overhead steel conveyor tracks, dozens of large iron hooks used to hang halved pigs after butchering suddenly began to swing on their own. They collided with each other, creating a cold, eerie clanging noise in the night. A wind blew in from nowhere, bringing a stench of rotting flesh and tangy blood rising from the drainage gutters. Khan swallowed hard, his gun-holding hand soaked in sweat. He pointed the flashlight toward the corner of the floor, where the giant industrial meat grinder sat, the very weapon he had used to dismember Baolan. Even without power, the shining stainless steel machine suddenly began to vibrate, emitting heavy, thudding sounds from inside the hopper. The sound of the motor grinding bone echoed exactly like it did on New Year's Eve, but this time it was slower, more erratic, and infinitely more terrifying. From the discharge nozzle of the grinder, it wasn't pieces of meat washing out. A thick, dark red liquid, as dense as bean paste, began to ooze out. Fresh blood gushed in torrents, flooding the concrete floor, dyeing a vast area red under the flickering flashlight beam. Khan took a step back, his foot catching on the stairs, almost falling. He gaped, his myopic eyes widening to their limits, his pupils dilating in absolute horror. In the middle of the bubbling pool of blood, a figure began to rise. It was not a whole human. It was a chaotic mess, patched and glued together from chunks of rotting meat, jagged fragments of bloody bone, and coils of intestines. The grotesque creature stood towering, possessing the massive, burly build of Baolan. The back of its head was smashed in. On its bloody, mangled face, only one large, fierce eye remained, burning with a red flame of hatred. In its right hand, formed from bone, tendon, and blood, it gripped an object, the ironwood-handled sledgehammer, the very murder weapon that had taken its life. Khan, return my life to me. A deep, hoarse voice, as if emanating from the depths of hell itself, slammed into Khan's eardrums. The sound echoed throughout the slaughterhouse, bouncing off the tin walls, drilling deep into the murderer's brain. The creature of flesh and scraps began to move, taking heavy, lumbering steps, dragging itself across the bloody floor, making a sickening squelch sound. It raised the sledgehammer high, lumbering toward the iron stairs leading to the mezzanine where Khan stood. Stay away from me, ghost! Get away! Khan screamed like a madman. The survival instinct surged, he raised the hunting rifle, aimed straight at the grotesque figure dragging itself toward him, and pulled the trigger repeatedly. The birdshot blasts cracked sharply, filling the air with gunsmoke. The pellets embedded themselves in the creature's body, tearing off chunks of rotting flesh that flew in all directions. But it was useless. How could the firearms of the mortal realm kill a vengeful spirit that had materialized, fueled by boundless resentment? The creature merely staggered slightly, then continued to knit the flesh torn apart by bullets back together, step by step, slow but unyielding, ascending the stairs. The sheer horror completely shattered Khan's sanity. He threw the empty rifle to the floor and turned to run for his life. He dashed down the auxiliary stairs behind the glass room, slipping and tumbling down the slippery steps. Khan rolled wildly down to the slaughterhouse floor, his clothes stained with blood and mud. He scrambled to his feet and hurried toward the back door leading to the waste dump and the holding pens. In his mind, there was only one thought left: run. He had to escape the meat grinder on legs that was hunting him with a sledgehammer. The wooden back door was blown open by the wind. Khan darted out into the pouring rain. The pitch-black night enveloped the muddy, manure-covered yard. The lump at the back of his neck throbbed as if about to burst. His obese belly hindered his running. He panted heavily, rainwater mixing with salty tears flowing into his mouth. Behind him, the heavy squelch of footsteps mixed with the scrape of the sledgehammer dragging on the concrete still doggedly pursued, never letting up. The vengeful soul was not in a hurry. It was savoring the panic, the despicable cowardice of the man who had once stabbed it in the back. Khan sprinted headlong toward the pig pens. It was a dilapidated, damp blockhouse, divided into sturdy iron cages used to hold pigs waiting to be slaughtered. The stench of excrement was overwhelming. He planned to squeeze through a hole in the wall to escape into the fields, but in the driving rain and blinding darkness, Khan's nearsighted, unglassed eyes couldn't see the path clearly. He stepped in a pile of slippery pig manure, lost his balance, and pitched forward. He slammed into the rusted iron pipe railing of a pen. The door of the pen, already worn out with a loose latch, gave way under Khan's heavy weight and swung open. Khan tumbled headlong into the cage, filled with manure and urine. He flailed, trying to stand up, but immediately, a deep, threatening growl sounded right next to his ear. The sound wasn't a pig's squeal, it was the hiss of a predatory beast being provoked. Khan's flesh crawled. He fumbled around, picking up the dropped flashlight and turning it on. The beam swept across the cramped, filthy pen, and then stopped dead. It was the pen of the breeding boar, a massive, nearly 300-kilo Duroc boar, kept for breeding before being culled for meat. The Duroc breed was famously aggressive, immensely strong, with sharp tusks rivaling a wild boar. Since the slaughterhouse went under, the boar had been starved for days, becoming ferocious, filthy, and incredibly deadly. Under the flickering flashlight beam, the massive boar slowly turned its bulky head toward the intruder. Khan Nan's jaw dropped, his entire body went numb, unable to utter a word. His heart seemed to stop, because under the faint light, the giant head of the Duroc boar was not a pig's head. It bore the face of a human. The face was broad, scruffy with a beard, plastered with mud and filth. The forehead and the back of the neck were smashed in, flesh and bone mingled. The large, fierce eyes, veined with red streaks, glared at Khan. It was the face of Baolan. The face carrying the ultimate fury of a vengeful soul that had possessed the animal's body to execute the final sentence. The pig with the human face opened its massive snout, revealing long, sharp, glistening tusks. From inside the beast's snout, Baolan's voice rang out, deafening and cold as a butcher's knife sharpening on a whetstone. You chopped me to pieces, fed me to the fish. Today, it's your turn, Khan. A bolt of lightning slashed across the night sky, tearing through the misty rain, illuminating the most horrifying spectacle in the history of the suburban slaughterhouse. The Duroc boar let out an earth-shaking roar and, using the brute force of its 300-kilo muscles, lunged furiously at Khan. No, get away, help me. Khan screamed in despair, trying to crawl toward the cage door, but his obese belly and absolute terror had pinned his legs to the ground. The beast in animal form pounced. The massive snout, armed with sharp tusks, snapped wide open, driving straight into Khan's shoulder. The sound of splintering bone mixed with the murderer's terrified scream. The crazed boar shook its head violently, tearing away a massive chunk of flesh from Khan's shoulder. Fresh blood sprayed like a waterfall, dyeing the peeling wall red. Khan rolled in the filthy pen, using his stub-fingered hand to blindly pound his fists against the beast's snout, but it was useless. The starving boar, manipulated by vengeful energy, had completely lost control. It stomped its sharp hooves onto Khan's chest, crushing him into the mud. It clamped its jaws onto his arm, gnawing fiercely. Then it ripped into Khan's pale, obese belly. The sharp teeth clawed and chopped the fatty flesh and skin that he had nurtured with sinful money. Khan Nan's screams grew fainter and fainter, until they were completely drowned out by the roaring storm and the horrific crunching of bone from the ravenous beast. Outside the cage, in the freezing rain, a figure patched together from rotting meat stood silently. The vengeful soul of Baolan let the sledgehammer drop to the ground. It raised its single red eye to look inside the pen, where the traitor was being disemboweled and torn apart, no longer in human form. A bloody justice had been served. The ruthless man who used a meat grinder to dismember his brother had, in the end, lost his life, chewed to pieces in the jaws of a pig, the very animal he had used to build his wealth. When Khan's body was nothing but a chaotic, pulverized mess, merging with the filthy manure and mud, the bloody figure outside the cage also slowly dissolved into the rain, leaving behind an eerie, deathly silence. The next morning, after the storm passed, the pale sunlight shone down on the deserted slaughterhouse. When Old Six the cripple came to feed the dogs, he was horrified to find the back door wide open. Following the long trail of blood on the ground, he walked toward the pig pens. At the pen of the Duroc boar, Old Six gasped, dropping the feed bucket and collapsing to the ground at the sight inside. The massive boar lay panting in a corner, its snout covered in fresh blood. And in the other corner, lying crumpled in the dirt and filth, was a human corpse, no longer intact. The body had been mauled and shredded, its entrails exposed, its face chewed beyond recognition. All that remained to identify the gruesome corpse of the director, Khan Nan, was a crushed pair of gold-rimmed glasses and a left hand missing 2 fingers. The police arrived and sealed off the scene. The investigation concluded, the victim had slipped and fallen into the pen of a starving, aggressive boar, resulting in a fatal attack by the animal. A tragic and bizarre workplace accident. The slaughterhouse was permanently shut down. The ferocious boar was destroyed. But to the veteran workers in the area, especially Old Six the cripple, they all implicitly understood that behind the gruesome death of the intellectual director was no random accident. It was the manifestation of a brutal spiritual sentence, a clear repayment of debt down to the very flesh and bone. Years later, the land was left abandoned, the slaughterhouse becoming a moss-covered ruin. On rainy New Year's Eves or the 15th nights of the 7th lunar month, locals passing by the Black Canal behind it would sometimes feel their hair stand on end as they heard the roaring of a meat grinder and the agonizing groans of a man echoing from the collapsed pig pens. The sound of the butcher's knife has ceased to fall, but the sentence of the heavenly Tao continues to echo forever, engraving an eternal philosophy: greed and betrayal are the sharpest blades that sever the cords of morality. Whoever uses despicable schemes to treat their fellow man more viciously than beasts will ultimately find their own life and soul cast into the depths of hell, chewed to pieces in the filthy mud of karmic retribution, right before their very eyes.